Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my VermiBag Mini, which is now 350 days in service. Only a couple weeks from hitting a year old, and you could probably see it just the same as I can. There's a whole bunch of flying insects buzzing around in front of the camera, so I've disturbed them because they've made themselves quite at home in this system here. And you know, I didn't even mention the flying insects, these gnats, but I figured we'd go over the information board really quickly, and then we'll proceed to giving them the food that I came down here with for them. So the system's been fed 28 times, and we're going to be giving them feeding 29 today. It's been 12 days since we last checked in here. We gave them a pretty abundant quantity of bedding in the form of napkins and other paper products, as well as what I remember to be a pretty good size feeding as well. And what I've got in store for them today is a whole bunch of bedding, freshly prepared shredded paper cardboard that's been soaking in a Mosquito Dunks solution. You can even see how much fluid I threw in here. I might have gone a little overboard with the Mosquito Dunks solution, thinking that maybe if we did go a little bit overboard on applying this stuff, we might see better results. Maybe it's because I've had this stuff sitting on the shelf now for a number of years. I don't know if this stuff has a shelf life. Maybe it has just kind of reached the end and doesn't have as much effectiveness as if it were new. So let's proceed to giving them their yummy meal today, which is 3 frozen plums, and that includes the pit. I figured we would just fish the pit out at some point later on in the game after they've consumed all the yummy fruit. We've got potato peels, and I've got a day's worth of coffee here as well. Might not look like much, but it does have a pretty good amount of weight to it. And man, oh man, look at all those flying insects buzzing around. It is becoming quite annoying, I must admit. So we're just going to plow down into this system, see how things look, see how they've done with that last feeding they got 12 days ago. And pretty much regardless of whether or not we find leftovers or not, we're definitely going to be giving them today's portion. It looks like they've even got a little bit of bonus vegetation to nibble on here in the form of a bunch of little plants that appear to be maybe pumpkin seeds that have sprouted or something. I don't really remember feeding pumpkin. And when I do, it usually doesn't include any seeds, so who knows what that is. So let's see here. We're only covering with that piece of newspaper that you saw in the beginning, so it certainly gives the surface the chance to dry out a little bit. And I have thought about maybe coming back in here with some sort of a more substantial cover that has the capability of holding in moisture a little bit better. My idea with doing this was to maybe let the surface dry to the point where maybe the flying insects wouldn't be interested in hanging out here anymore. But it certainly doesn't seem to have deterred them any. Here and there I'm bumping into a little piece of larger, tough material. And at one point when we launched this system, we threw a whole bunch of pumpkin stems in here, many of them that are still holding up just because they were so large. But some of them were much smaller, and that's what we might be bumping into here now. I figured if I can start crumbling some of these really, really old materials, then they might break down a little bit more readily. This would be the stem of a banana. So let's dive down. Let's see what they've got going on with their last feeding. Oh, I think we've encountered the gourd, which I just put 2 pretty good sized breaks into, just attempting to get my hand around it. Remarkably, it is still holding together. Some of the other chunks of gourd that we've encountered here and there we've been crumbling, but this one, I think just because of its endurance and the fact that it has held up so long, I'm taking pity on it and allowing it to stick around. But like, these are all chunks of gourd here, which are all so softened up at this point that I'm quite capable of just shattering them. And If I can, then why not? And I could probably do the same with this thing if I wanted to, but like I said, sometimes it is interesting just to keep some of these large, slow composting items around, as we've been doing with this pumpkin stem over here. 350 days ago, I emptied a bunch of material out of my yellow buckets that these worms were living in. So I just figured, instead of trying to separate the worms from their castings, I would just take everything, castings, worms, and sort of prime this system with some ready to go castings right at the bottom. So the stuff that this system was built with from the start was already nice finished castings material. So someday when I finally harvest the castings, when I open up the bottom and drop out the contents, or a portion of its contents, we'll have some really nice fine stuff. Sometimes I wonder if it might be getting dry down there. If it is, then maybe today's application of bedding with all that moisture will moisten some stuff that's down low, if it manages to seep down to the bottom. But I really don't know what to expect if I were to open up the bottom and try to pull out material. I don't know what I would get. So yeah, I mean, I do recall commenting during the last feeding about the portion being quite generous, and I definitely remember a good many napkins and chunks of paper being included with the feeding too. And I think we might be encountering some of it here and there, but I don't think I see very much of it. So they've done a great job on depleting the last feeding. I even thought maybe I should wait a few more days. But even though we usually don't bump into a huge number of worms down here in this system, I do believe it has a pretty sizable population in it. So now I thought that maybe we would even grab a couple of these filters. I've been sort of collecting them up in the kitchen. I figured it's time to bring them down finally, so why not just allocate a couple of these coffee filters to help us establish a little bit of a landing pad onto which we can apply today's feeding. And that would also include this old coffee filter that was serving the function of feeding zone indicator. So I've got a nice new replacement to drop in there in its place. And I think before we put in the foods and the bedding, we would just drop in those slightly older objects that we encountered along the way. 2 pumpkin stems and a gourd that's still kind of holding out, but as you saw, it's definitely getting pretty fragile. I guess the other reason I thought it might be a good idea to drop in these dry pieces of paper was because maybe they'll be able to absorb a little bit of this Mosquito Dunks solution, and rather than just coming in here with my squirt bottle, which is how I usually apply the Mosquito Dunks solution, now we're coming in with a great deal more of this stuff. Maybe I've just been a little bit too skimpy, not applying as much as I could, so I figured maybe today we would come in with a good generous portion of the Mosquito Dunks soaked into some of the bedding that we're providing to accompany the feeding, and maybe someday we'll start seeing some improvement with the flying insects down here. It is becoming a little bit of a nuisance, if you ask me. So I'll drop in today's portion of coffee. Not a whole lot. We'll set the feeding zone indicator aside. Here we have some potato peel, and I'll save these other coffee filters for some other use elsewhere. Up here on the top surface, I believe, is a good place to put these yummy plums, although I do wonder if they're maybe a little bit too close to the surface. Maybe they'll attract even more flying insects. Hopefully not. Hopefully we've got enough material shoved around the edges with which we can thoroughly cover up the feeding zone and mask the delicious scent of the yummy fruits that we're putting in here as today's feeding. So, looks like we've even got a little bit of this leafy matter that was at some point recently sprinkled out across the top surface of the system. This is another pumpkin stem, it would seem. It's so weird, you know, I'm just disturbing the material, and as a result, flying insects hanging out in this stuff are swarming in my face. Not the most pleasant thing, unfortunately. So I don't know, one of these days maybe I'll either up the amount of Mosquito Dunks material that I soak in my water solution mix to see if that helps, and I guess that would just get me to the finish line as far as depleting what I've got there, because then maybe what I really need to do is go out and buy some more. So it seems like we've not gone very deep here. I'm still bumping into these frozen plums. You know, I've got my grit. I almost forgot. Let's give them some crushed eggshell too. And now we can really consider that as a complete meal and check-in. And now we're only maybe 2.5 weeks away from this system hitting a year old. Not sure if I'll even be around. I've got travel plans. I might not even be around when this system hits a year old, so I'll have to check the calendar and see how things pan out. But whether or not we make it back in here between now and the system's 1-year anniversary of being in service or not, I don't know. We shall see. If not, then we'll probably get in here sooner in preparation for me being away. So that's it for our check-in, everyone, with the now 350-day-old VermiBag Mini with the red wigglers, getting a nice big dosage of BTI Mosquito Dunk solution with their bedding. Let's keep our fingers crossed. It'd be nice to see some improvement down here. All right, everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.